So we decided to stage it here. We had a lot of people here. 40 people maybe. And we gave some presentations, I had a conversation, and this is our second hour, and now we're trying to have slightly more intimate conversations, but we're also interested in putting them on the internet because we want to speak to larger groups of people, but also to Mark here and to record our place. So these are our questions, and I'll read them to you. You can respond to anyone. We're just going to chat for just short time. The place of HIV/AIDS at SCMS, or the pastness of HIV/AIDS, or the present of HIV/AIDS, constituencies of HIV/AIDS. Let me say hi.
Hello, camera. Hello, folks. Whatever world you're in at the moment. So, any of those framing questions. I think for me, having heard about this at a distance and not knowing the context of it, I was struck by sort of the pastness presentness question. That there's an assumption that the crisis has passed and that we no longer need to speak of AIDS as a present, an ongoing crisis or situation. I mean, obviously the language of crisis has its own set of complications, and maybe it's important to move beyond those and find other framing narratives to talk about. So for me, I was immediately struck by, I had a couple of reactions. One, like, absolutely. One, and then, this is part of so many conversations that don't actually happen in SCMS. I think that we bracket this sort of kind of political discourse here in ways that I find often very productive and balkanizing. And so the fact that this panel wasn't here, it's an indication of that problem in particular, a need to always find a frame that works within some kind of acontextual cinema and media studies that happens here. So that was sort of my immediate reaction.
Yeah, I mean, do you understand?
Well, I mean, that's something that didn't come up actually, and I didn't necessarily want to approach that. Is that, okay, yes, HIV/AIDS is maybe not as discussed as much within, SCMS or media studies because it, as an epidemic problem or social problem, is less so, right? It's diminished. We've a lot of progress, it's not a death threat, etc. But to what degree is it also reflective of the fact that media studies in general is less about questions of difference, identity politics, cultural studies, these kinds of things, right? So there's more kind of a technological basis, or atextual, you said, atextual factors influencing what it is that we're supposed to study.
Well, that's why I kind of said you could say that the crisis has or has not passed, because for some folk it's still very active. And this we're in this race, right? And class and issues of marginalized communities, where other marginalized communities, where it's still very active, outside of the notion that, well, because for a certain group of people, or a white bourgeois subset, the crisis has been managed. We've come to a point of management. But for others, that necessarily hasn't happened.
Well, I'll say something. So, I mean, what you seem to say is that for people with HIV/AIDS who can't afford healthcare, the crisis is managed.
Well, I know, okay, go ahead, please.
Please. I'm an HIV positive gay man from a middle-class background, so it's managed for me to a certain extent. There are a series of other issues that are circulating for me now that aren't being addressed. A lot of that is tied to the sense that HIV/AIDS, if it's going to be a social problem, is one that should be discussed or dealt with in terms of like illness and death and immediate kind of your life is in danger. What about just kind of like trying to remove some of the stigma, some of the ideas of what HIV/AIDS means, and also start thinking about what it actually is in the present, like, we talked about the viral divide or the positive negative. Like, how can we actually do the work to help mitigate the divide now that maybe the threat of infection or something like that isn't as perilous? Like, how do we set a whole new paradigm for other questions to be addressed on that issue? Not just that HIV/AIDS should be thought about in the context of death or things like this.
Well, this is why it was probably good for me to have been here earlier for some of the conversations. I'm not self-flagellating, I actually just kind of say, I obviously missed a piece of the conversation that would be good for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was actually an amazing conversation. Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the things that I wanted to think about in relationship to your points was about the nature of the political and what it means and how it looks to do political work within an academic context is something that I've been asked to talk about a lot in other contexts. And this panel felt like that to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because it was on this weird dais and, pushed off, but because of the ways we were talking to each other, because some of the things we were saying were academic. They were very much theoretized and thinking about AIDS in this more abstract way about discourse. But some of them we were talking about like on the ground, art that people are making, and then lived experience and how we talk to each other as colleagues, lived experience and theoretical experience. That was really live here. I was thinking about what is it like political here? How does that change?
So maybe it's a matter of asking, when we use the term crisis, what are we invoking through the term? Rather than saying it's a yes or no to using crisis.
Definitely. And I think, something I'm just toying around with when it comes up. When some a little bit, it's about, it's like a sticking point, but the way in which people, it's been hearing people argue is instead of saying HIV, they're just saying AIDS, it's the opposite. Like, HIV and AIDS are so different. Like, I have HIV. I might not ever have AIDS. So to refer to it as AIDS is like a huge deal. It's not conceptualized the fact that HIV does not mean illness, right? And so even that point in language, when someone's, a doctor, he made a slip and she goes, oh, it's no big deal with illness. But like the fact that they think it's a big deal, really speaks to the fact that we're not conceptualizing or compensating for historical changes and that kind of thing.
So are you saying that it is simultaneously manageable and livable, but still always a big deal, always present?
Yeah, sure. But I think the fact that people think it's no big deal to say AIDS, to include those who are HIV positive, speaks to the fact that it really hasn't sunk in that case to that point. That's necessary. I see. I'm somewhat hesitant to make that semantic point because I'm not usually that it's a minor detail, it doesn't really matter. But I think it's something about our habits of language that speak to a larger lack of coming to a comprehension of what HIV means now, as opposed to what it used to be. There kind of used to be an HIV arrow kind of AIDS, right? But that arrow doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't seem like it's semantic, though. For you, it's a lived difference.
Yeah. Right? I mean, it's almost like it's evident in semantics. People go, or you're making too much of it, But I don't think it is anymore.
No, and it's interesting because that was what AIDS activism was one of the things it did most successfully, right? It was like, we're going to be activists around discourse. We're actually going to say that discourse matters, and our activism is going to shift discourse, because when you shift discourse, people's lived experiences change, money moves in different ways, medicine moves in different ways. And you said in the panel, this is a revolutionary project. It is, because it's the same project and a new set of discourses needs to be mobilized because the old words actually aren't working correctly. They were put into place by a different crisis. But you don't have a movement. I mean, it took a movement to do that. It takes no less than a movement, and one person can't do it, and 3 people can't do it, and we don't have a movement, and some of the time we'll have the same problems now, which is that 4 people see it. So, that discursive shift is the politics. But you need a movement for revolution.
Yeah. This is
not
whether or not they're going to happen or not.
there, yes, it is. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Better late than never.
Yeah.
No, it's a 2-hour session. This is the second part.
Okay.
The first part was like, ah, and this is quiet.
Thank you, Justin, for being a camera.
Yeah.
What's your name?